And we are live. How you doing, Mets fans? It's your boy Wardy, and does it feel good to be back? Yes, it does. Really appreciate everybody that have been supporting me along the way, not only the past couple years, but especially over the past week, as I have just gone back from Port St. Lucie, where thankfully my amazing sponsor here at BetUS hooked me up and hooked up fellow amazing creators with an awesome place to come out with awesome coverage on not just the Mets, but MLB futures as a whole at the BetUS house. So if you haven't checked out our previous content throughout over the past week, highly implore you all to do so. We still have some videos still coming out, so make sure you're on the lookout for it. But we have play to get into today, something I'm really excited about. The Mets had their spring breakout game where we got to see all the top prospects full-fledged, not just from the offensive category, but also from the pitching category, showcase themselves today. And my biggest takeaway far and away is, do the Mets have pitching depth? My goodness, my God, my gracious, we have a lot to get into. So everyone first chiming in live on a replay, make sure to smash that like and subscribe on, as it is the easiest and best way to support the channel. Thank you all so much in advance, as I do greatly appreciate it. And guys, let's get into this one, because like I said, there are plenty positive takeaways from today's game. This is one of two games the Metropolitans are playing today. They of course have their normal regularly scheduled spring game around 6 or 6:10, so in the next hour or so. So don't be surprised if you see another post-game show today. But I wanted to do them separate today, and the main reason honestly was just because this was a situation for the Mets where I really felt like we need to break down and really appreciate in its own right what is going on right now with these players. Because like I said, there are a lot of positives from the young talent today that we're about to get into, so just bear with me 1 second and then we will get rolling. And again, be sure to smash that like and subscribe on as you guys are first chiming in. Really does mean a lot. For whatever reason, the corners I don't have what I usually have graphic wise. I usually have dope logos and stuff like that, but that's okay. We're still gonna get into this one, and we're still gonna do it how we always do it, because this is an awesome game to break down. I see Edwin, Chicken, Fuego, Mama Worm, how you guys all doing here? Love you too. Appreciate you guys first chiming in. And now I really got to start off by saying, guys, can we just take a moment to appreciate, if you had the pleasure of watching today's 4-2 victory over the Nationals, where the Mets had all their top prospects listed forefront for us to see right before our very eyes, I hope you came out with the same takeaways that I did, which were a lot of positives. On the offensive end, we saw guys like Jet Williams, Drew Gilbert, Luis Angel Acuna, Ryan Clifford, Marco Vargas, the list goes on and on. Lots of awesome young talent. Guys are expected to impact the bigs at some point this season, headlined by guys like Drew Gilbert and even Luis Angel Acuna, Jet Williams especially. But the pitching front, I just cannot get over what we saw from these Mets pitchers today. But before I do all that, I do want to share just some brief updates with you all, because I know I will reference this in tonight's post-game too, after the Mets win or loss against the Nats. But I do want to emphasize it here in case you don't watch that show, because there have been updates since the last time that we guys did a live stream where I'm talking one-on-one with you all. And I just want to share them briefly. As we know, the Mets have been connected to JD Martinez and JD Davis. I spoke on JDM. I really haven't spoken on JD Davis much, so be on the lookout, as I will be having a video coming out more than likely tomorrow on that front. And I have plenty to say in regards to a potential reunion with JD Davis. From there, we saw David Stearns had a presser today. Highly implore you all to make sure you watch it at some point. It was aired by SNY and the Mets earlier today on their socials. Lots of key takeaways, and really what stood out to me is the Mets all spring long look like that they're going to continue to contemplate and figure out what they want to do, not only to round out their rotation, but also the DH position and the bullpen. The DH is the big one. It's abundantly clear that the Mets have anything but a certainty as what they want to do there thus far, and that's why they're still involved in the markets of the players we just discussed, while still considering and giving leashes to Mark Vientos and then at the hot quarter and Brett Beatty, for example. So to be continued on that front, but again, a lot of key takeaways I'm sure we'll discuss more over the next week from David's comments. Jeff McNeil is progressing well, and it looks like he will be playing hopefully as soon as Sunday, at least swinging a bat. We will soon see what happens there. McNeil has been dealing with an ailment, nothing too serious this spring, but again, has set him back a little bit. Joey Lucchesi was optioned in AAA today after having one very underwhelming spring start. The fastball sat 88, 89 miles per hour, so there was some concern level there. Is he injured at all? I'm not entirely sure, but Lucchesi, you'd expect to have a bigger leash. This spring only had one start of 1 inning, and that was it, and now he's already going to be in AAA. So unfortunate for him, but that's a greater reality when you have guys like Tyler McGill, Jose Quintana, Adrian Hauser tonight, Jose Butto, all continuing to pitch scoreless outings for the Mets. Jose Butto was masterful again yesterday, touched 97 on the gun when 4 shutty. We saw Tyler McGill continue his brilliance a couple nights prior. Jose Quintana, same applies. Mets pitching has been the most impressive thing far and away this spring training, not only for the young talents that we're about to get into in today's show, but even on the roster. There's a reason why they currently lead all of Major League Baseball in ERA this spring. And while I know it's spring, so you only take things with a grain of salt, there's also reasons to be happy and optimistic knowing that the vast majority of this pitching staff was completely built by David Stearns with a lot of these key acquisitions this past offseason. So to see them have newfound immediate success is important, and hopefully that's something we can see transfer over to a higher degree at the MLB level throughout the regular season. So those are some key updates for you guys I want to share. Again, we also see that Austin Allen, the side armor who looked nasty yesterday, and Rylan Bannon, who has been flashing the glove brilliantly this spring, and their respective positions have also been cut, and we'll see if they stay in the organization or not, or if they end up going elsewhere. But let's get into the game now. So for those that did not get a chance to watch today's game, this was the starting lineup for the young baby Mets Metropolitans here. It was led off by Jet Williams at center field today. Not Ryan Clifford, Mr. Drew Gilbert there, batting second in right field. Third, Luis Angel Acuna. Fourth, Ryan Clifford. Fifth, Kevin Parada. Sixth, Alex Ramirez, who I think is going to surprise some people this year after having a very underwhelming year in high A last season. Then we see Mr. Colin Houck there at DH. Jesus Baez starting at third base, and Marco Vargas there to bat ninth at second base. So just in case people are unaware, briefly, Drew Gilbert, of course, Ryan Clifford, what do they have in common? Those were the key assets that came in the Justin Verlander trade last trade deadline. Luis Angel Acuna for Max Scherzer. Marco Vargas was a part of that trade for David Robertson with the Miami Marlins. Jeremy Rodriguez, 17-year-old prospect who had a tremendous first or second year there. And we saw the DSL League this past year was acquired in the Tommy Pham trade. He had a big hit today, too, to help increase the Mets lead, give them the lead, rather. So lots of key takeaways on that front. And pitching today that we will get into shortly, Dominic Hamill, Tyler Stewart, Blake Tidwell, McLean, Brandon Sproat, Calvin Ziegler. Lots of zeros. Awesome stuff that we saw from the pitching staff of the baby Mets today that I'm excited to get into too. And I appreciate, Daniel, how you doing in here. Appreciate everyone watching live on a replay. For the farm system that has no pitching, these young arms looked very slept on. 100% agree, and I'm really excited to get into this because a big takeaway for me is just I've known about the Mets pitching depth. I've even had the pleasure of interviewing some of these guys, including Dominic Hamill, over the past year or so. And while we've known that the Mets haven't had the flashiest group of pitchers in the minor leagues, you can clearly tell that they now have a good chunk of guys where if any of these guys got called up in the next year or two, you're not, freaking out too much as the same way that you would if, say, this was maybe a Denny Reyes or, of course, to a lesser degree, a Jared Eichhoff, if you will. Like, these are actual young, high-rising right and left-handers in this rotation, and you got to be excited about the prospect of them cracking the bigs not only this season, but next season too, as the Mets are going to be parting ways with a lot of arms likely after the 2024 year, and that's why it's going to be pivotal to see the development of some of these key guys. Headline again by Dominic Hamill, Tyler Stewart, Blake Tidwell. Brandon Sproat is going to absolutely skyrocket in the rankings this year. He looked tremendous. McLean, same thing. Calvin Ziegler has been coming off of ailments. The Canadian, there's lots to like about him too. But now let's get into a little bit more on the game here. Just a quick breakdown. What were the key takeaways in my opinion? We saw there in the first inning, Dominic Hamill had himself a clean inning of work. And what also I noticed too is that, yes, we saw Dominic Hamill 95 on the gun with the heater and working with a nice slider sitting there in the low to mid 80s. Nice movement there. It struggled to locate a little bit with the fastball at times today, but again, it's a spring breakout game here. I'm sure he was pumped to be out there. And one thing that was in unison with most of these Mets stars today was life on that fastball. The Mets have a lot of guys that can chuck it, that can easily touch 97. And then when you get to guys like Sproat casually touching 99 on the gun, he's going to touch triple digits a lot this year. Very exciting stuff here. But in the first game, we did see Drew Gilbert gets on second base, actually, because Woods, the big bat, the young, talented prospect there for the Nats, leaned the way for them, of course. They have such a talented group of guys, too, not only with Wood, but also Cruz, House. They're leading the way there for sure. He missed a ball in right field because he couldn't command it with the sun. That allows Drew Gilbert to get to second base. And then his teammate in the Astros organization, teammate again now, Ryan Clifford, who's deemed by many, including Joe DeMeo, who we had on the channel before, breaking down his top 10 prospects. Joe did a great job on SNY's broadcast, too. So shout out to you once more, Joe, you absolute beauty. We saw how Ryan Clifford is easily the guy that might just have the most power among all young Mets prospects. Right away, beautifully barreled ball goes opposite field for an RBI single to bring in Drew Gilbert. That would open up the scoring for the Mets today. Then as we get to the fourth inning, Kevin Parada with an RBI single that would drive in Clifford after getting on via walk and then taking second base on the pass ball, if not wild pitch. And then we saw Colin Houck, again, a former top draft pick over the past year or so for the Mets with an RBI single. Houck, if I'm not mistaken, is also the one that grew up a Braves fan, so it is something to monitor. just fair warning. It wouldn't shock me in the slightest if the Mets somehow, some way saw their prospect end up in Atlanta at some point in his career. Hopefully, he prospers with the Mets, however. And then we have Jesus Baez again. And what stood out so much about Jesus Baez today, again, another infield prospect for the Mets, was his hard contact. That power was ridiculous. Let me put it this way. Nolan Arenado has never hit, and this is straight from James Shiano's mouth of the Mets podcast, good friend of mine, because James tweeted this earlier. It's 100% true. Nolan Arenado, for reference, has never hit a ball 112 miles per hour. Jesus Baez just did that today. It was a line out 112 miles per hour from a 19-year-old. Can we just take a moment to appreciate that? Like, that in itself is actually ridiculous. Yes, it was a 7-inning game today, for those that were wondering. And yes, Kenny Pickett did get traded to the Eagles, because people that don't know, I am a Steelers fan. I talk about them casually every now and then. They did that because Kenny Pickett is from, the just outside of Philly. He's in South Jersey area. He grew up an Eagles fan, same way that Saquon Barkley's from Whitehall, which is literally right around the corner from me. I live in the Lehigh Valley. Whitehall is actually a rival high school of mine growing up, and I wasn't shocked to see Saquon go there, and I'm not shocked to see Kenny getting dealt there now to kind of be more in his home area. Yes, he, of course, played at Pitt, but he grew up in the Philly area, was an Eagles fan growing up, and now he's going to be backing up Jalen Hurts. But that's not what we're talking about today. Today's not football discussion. Today is baseball discussion. So let's talk a little bit further about this, because as we then advance to the fifth inning, we would see Jeremy Rodriguez, as I mentioned, 17-year-old prospect acquired in the Tommy Pham trade last year. Infielder had himself just under a 300 average and just under a 900 OPS, including 3 home runs, 33 RBIs, and 19 stolen bases in just 51 DSL games last year. And he rips himself an absolute beauty. He gets himself on base with an RBI single to increase the lead. And then Peraza, another Mets prospect, gets a broken bat bloopy down just past the third baseman there for an RBI single. The Mets would again win by a final score of 4-2 today, but I don't really want to emphasize too much on the offensive end. For me, again, it was awesome to see Ryan Clifford showcase that power. He is again one of the hardest hitters in all minor league baseball, and he is going to be a force to be reckoned with, and gives the Mets some interesting options to think about as a guy that can not only play corner outfield, but he's also going to get a lot of reps at first base this year. That's where he's likely going to play for the majority of the season. So Ryan Clifford, Pete Alonso, with his future, you do have to wonder exactly how close of an eye they're going to have on the top prospect here. And Clifford, who again skyrocketed in the rankings with the Astros after he was drafted, after being a low draft pick, all because of that power, that home run ability has carried him to this point. Just a tremendous young talent that the Mets have in their farm that we can thank Justin Verlander, Kate Upton for, along with Drew Gilbert, of course. But what I really want to emphasize today, guys, is once more the pitching, because the pitching was nothing short of absolutely spectacular. Also, one more key update, because speaking of pitching, I don't want to forget this, and I'm going to mention this at tonight's post-game show too. Kodai Senga, unfortunately, is not going to be pitching for another 7 to 10 days. He wasn't like completely shut down, but again, you can call it a setback if you'd like. It's not anything I would be overly concerned about. My concern level is probably right around a 5 at the moment. They want to make sure that they don't rush him in any way. They're going to get further imaging done just to make sure everything is going as planned, according to David Stearns. So as things currently project, we're likely not going to see Kodai Senga pitch this season until the end of May, getting into June, which was my initial expectation prior to finding out his diagnosis with his injury with his shoulder. But now that we're getting, essentially a setback a little bit like this, they don't want to rush him whatsoever. Rightfully so. I don't care. I do care, obviously, how long it takes Kodai Senga to get back on the bump, but I do not care enough at the potential risk of him dealing with a more significant injury and then he's dealt out for the rest of the season. I don't want that. No one wants that. So Kodai Senga, just rest up, get better. When you're healthy and you're ready to go, we will have you back in this rotation. No need to rush him, especially in a year like this where we don't have the aspirations, if you will, that the Yankees and their fans have been going through, sweating bullets the past week with Garrett Cole. They got some good news on that front, but we'll soon find out if that stays true throughout the entirety of Cole's rehab there. Not that I wish injury on anybody, but I know when it comes to pitchers, especially a guy that throws as hard as Cole does and is dealing while there isn't necessarily any tears in that elbow, there's inflammation for a reason. Does it come from a bone spur or anything like that? Not entirely sure. For now, they're going to give him PRP injections, probably some plasma in there too, and they're going to hope that over the next month or two that he'll be right and be able to get back on the mound. Reason why I emphasize that is because us Mets fans know that feeling all too well when it comes to ace caliber talents that are down before the season begins, and it is insane to think about that there is a reality that Luis Severino 100% pitches more innings than Gerrit Cole this season, which in its own right is just so baffling to me and mind-boggling. Credit to Sevy the way he's been able to stay healthy, knock on wood, at this point, and credit also to the Mets and really getting the most out of him thus far this spring. I mean, Luis Severino has looked like an absolute stud, and Jose Quintana is now named the Mets opening day starter, but if it wasn't going to be him, I wasn't going to be shocked if they actually pivoted and considered someone like Sevy just because of how pure his stuff is. I think Severino has the best stuff, actually, in this entire rotation. Of pure stuff for swing and miss, getting outs, there's no one that I actually like more, aside from Kodai Senga, obviously, but we're not including Senga, given where things are currently at with the rotation makeup. And yes, the game was on SNY today. What game am I referring to? It was the Mets spring breakout game today between the young baby Mets and the young baby Nationals. This is one of two games the Mets are playing today. They have another one coming up in the next half hour or so. We'll be back. We'll be done with this live stream well before that happens. I just wanted them separate here so I could really talk a bit more about the prospects in particular, and that way you guys have your separate breakdown. So Dominic Hamel today, as we saw, 2 innings of 2 hit, 1 earned run ball, 1 walk, and 2 strikeouts. Worked that fastball and slider really nice. Again, wishing Dom all the best in the minor leagues this year. He was the Mets 2022 minor league pitcher of the year. Had a privilege of interviewing him over this past calendar year or so with Anthony Recker and Joe Sorrello. So if you haven't checked that out, make sure you do so. It is on the channel if you go and look up Dominic Hamel interview WardyNYM. Then we had Tyler Stewart, who in my opinion is going to be a sleeper to impact this Mets either bullpen or rotation at some point this season. Stewart, who's coming off of a tremendous year where he pitched all the way up into Double-A last year with just over a 2.2 ERA, had himself a masterful 1-2-3 perfect inning today, allowing no hits, no walks, no earned runs, no nothing. Blade Tidwell, who's deemed by many as potentially having some of the best stuff out of all Mets pitchers in the minor leagues today, gave up 3 hits and 1 earned run along with 1 walk there in the first inning. But again, I was just really happy, not first inning, the 1 inning he pitched, but I was really happy to see Blade Tidwell out there on the mound. Anytime that you get to see these young prospects again showcasing their talents, showcasing their stuff, it's exciting because I can tell you guys wholeheartedly, I'm not someone that goes out of my way that is watching minor league games religiously. I will, of course, will box score, I will look at highlights, but especially with covering the Mets on the day-to-day the way that I do, I have such little time to also be able to commit fully on the prospect end of things. So that's why I especially appreciate this game so much, because I know about all these pitchers. I've talked about all of them on the channel. Literally talked about most of them with Joe DeMayo just over the past month or so here on WardyNYM, breaking down his prospect list. But even having said all that, I still have a lack of familiarity and understanding with some of these players, because like you, I too am a diehard Mets fan that wants to know more about these guys. And I'm very much a visual learner. I can read up on articles through The Athletic all I want, but I love seeing them on the mound, and they can showcase right there, right before my eyes, exactly what I'm getting. And when I tell you that I was unbelievably impressed today with not only just McLean, but also Brandon Sproat. My goodness, my God, my gracious. McLean, of course, looked fantastic today. 1 inning, allowed 1 hit, 1 walk, 0 earned runs, none of that stuff. He was a draft pick by the Mets just over the past year or so, looked great. Brandon Sproat, of course, who's a 2-time Mets draft pick too, was absolutely disgusting. And I want to shout out James again once more, because something that James made note of a while ago, he said, he was working in the Mets pitching lab right after he was drafted, that being in Brandon Sproat. So he has been already working in this new Mets pitching lab over the past how many months now, and we're seeing it right before our very eyes, touching 98, 99 on the gun with ease with the heater, a 7-pitch perfect inning there you saw from Brandon Sproat for the most part. 2 strikeouts as well. This is someone that's going to likely be a top 100 prospect by the end of the season and is going to skyrocket and find himself comfortably in that top 10 ranking for the Mets prospects this season. The guy's stuff is so through the roof that it wouldn't shock me whatsoever if he ends up becoming one of the biggest arms that the Mets currently have available in their minor league system just on the pure stuff alone. We saw the command look brilliant today. Again, this is someone who, again, if you guys love to follow along with prospects, if you really like to go watching minor leagues, whether it's, lower high A, double A, triple A, this is a guy to lock in on. Same thing with Tyler Stewart. And then my boy Calvin Ziegler, again, this was a top draft pick by the Mets a couple years ago too, coming from Canada, and he has dealt with a plethora of ailments over the past year and a half. Finally healthy, Calvin Ziegler touched 97 on the gun with his final strikeout today, pitching a scoreless inning, and there in the 7th, which would end the game there. He got the save, technically, if you want to call that. He looked awesome, had himself 2 strikeouts, 0 hits, 0 walks, whole lot of nothing. As a whole today, the Mets pitching looked tremendous, but my biggest takeaway once more is just how good they looked. You're in Palmerton, Fuego. There you go, my man. You're like, 45 away from me or so? That's nothing. That's nothing. So, quick story, everybody, and then we'll get on to wrapping up the show, because I know we got another post-game today. I want to answer a couple of your questions, too. Appreciate everyone watching live and a replay. Really does mean a lot, everybody. So, as I mentioned, I don't live in Pennsylvania. I mean, I do live in Pennsylvania. I don't reside in New York. I usually have to drive north of 2.5 hours to every Mets game I go to. I've only had one person acknowledge me in my local area. When I'm at Citi Field, when I'm anywhere, of course, it happens all the time. Not something that I brag. I'm grateful for. It's awesome. I love when my viewers come up to me and talk to me and say, hey, I love what you do. I watch you all the time and want to talk shop on the Mets. It's the best feeling in the world, and that's what I enjoy most about what I do. And yesterday, I go to Shake Shack, and this older gentleman ordering in front of me looks at me, and he's like, I know you. I recognize you. Like, you talk about the Mets. I'm like, yes, I do, which I thought was hilarious because this man profiled not in a way that I would have expected him to be a Mets fan whatsoever. Like, he was straight Grateful Dead Mets fan. If you know, you know. That exact kind of look is exactly what he was. And then furthermore, I then go on to a store. I'm talking shop with the workers there. One of them is a huge Mets fan. Shout out to my man, Jean. You know who you are. That I'm very excited to talk more with. And they hooked me up with a free Mets hat. I mean, yesterday was so unintentional. It wasn't even supposed to be about me. I was going out with my girl, just trying to have a nice day as I came back from Port St. Lucie. And then it was the most bizarre thing in the best way possible. It was a little freaky. I'm like, am I in New York or something? I'm not used to being treated like this around this area. So shout out to everyone that I interacted with. That was very nice. And shout out to Dave Kaplitz, as always, who's a tremendous supporter of mine. He sent more things my way. Shout out to others too. I will be showcasing those in the other post-game show tonight. So make sure you guys are on the lookout for that. But yeah, it was very, very cool to have those interactions and experiences. And it really just got me further excited for the regular season, guys, because we're going to be doing some meetups this year. We're going to probably doing some pop tables. I think we might actually try to get set up a pop-up table to do for Mets opening day. Not confirmed yet, but is something that I'm starting to kick the tires on, trying to see if we can make that happen. And I'm hoping to do some events throughout the regular season with you guys, not only at, bars, but also there actually at Citi Field itself, where we all hang out at a Mets game together. If I can get 10 to 20 tickets collected in a certain section so we can all have a great time, I'm going to be trying to do that too. So very excited about everything that's going to be coming out on the coverage this year, the content. And I'm just really excited to do it with every single one of you fellow Mets fans. So I don't really think there's much more that I need to harp on from today's game. There weren't too much on the offensive end. It was strictly the pitching that I highly implore you all to really focus in on. Even if you're a casual when it comes to those certain prospects, like I know that I honestly am, this is now the time where you really want to look at these guys, because it was awesome to see the MLB come together and make this happen. We saw Paul Skeens, of course, yesterday match up against Jackson Holiday, top prospect versus top prospect, two of the biggest names in baseball right now. That was tremendous. And it's so great for the game, in my opinion, to be having these types of things continuing to happen when you have these prospect breakout games. Because, look, we all want to see Jet Williams, Drew Gilbert, Luis Angel Acuna, Marco Vargas, etc. play, but we would like to see them play for more than just an inning or two. So to at least see a little bit more of a leash in this kind of game where we don't have to worry about veterans, especially minor leaguers that aren't going to crack the team and what their upside is, not being involved in a game like this was nice. But I will say this. This is my big question to everyone watching live on a replay. I will ask this again in tonight's show. How do you feel about the automated strike zone? Jet Williams today had a call that he thought was a ball. It was reverse challenge to a strike. Now, the automated strike zone, I see the pros and the cons to completely. I'm in favor of it. It was rusty today. It's something that they're obviously working on because it's going to be utilized so much in the minor leagues, but isn't going to be at the major league level yet this season. But it's coming, and it's very interesting that you get 3 challenges. That I notice the ump is still there, but he's basically there, again, for the challenges if needed, and really he's kind of just being the observer to make sure the calls are correct. So it's a fascinating one to look at. It's a little odd, especially when you're not used to watching it. And I see the pros and the cons of both, especially umps having impact on the game can benefit your team or hurt your team. But I think for the sake of trying to have things as consistent as possible, that is why the automated strike zone is the future. Regardless on how you feel about it, it's going to come. It's going to be a consistent thing. But I do want to know where you guys stand on that. Were you happy about it today? Did you not like what you saw? Is this something that you think needs a lot more work? Whatever it is, drop it down below. I'd love to hear that, guys. Watching Baseball WardyNYM, of course, as usual, Martino throwing cold water on anything and everything good about the Mets. He says the Mets are way overconfident with their pitching depth prospects. They are. They are. That's why the Mets aren't going to sign Jordan Montgomery. That's why the Mets aren't going to sign Michael Lorenzen. The Mets are only going to make another pitching move at this rate if they deal with another significant injury to their rotation. Aside from that, it's more than likely not going to happen. And on the offensive end, JD Davis, JD Martinez, there's a reason why the Mets are still involved in these markets, and I'm looking forward to breaking down more. I talked about JDM just a couple days ago there from the BetUS house live in Port St. Lucie, but now it's time to talk about JD Davis, which, if you guys know how I've been about JD Davis, you know how I'm going to talk tomorrow. My man Giraffe Neck Mark is very much on the JD Davis train, and you might see something a bit different tomorrow. I'll leave it at that. I will leave it at that. Oh, I didn't know there was a separate game for the prospects. That's cool. Yes, exactly. Yeah, a lot of people didn't know. They promoted it fairly well, I thought. SNY, I think they did a very good job hyping. I think they hyped it up more than maybe what it needed to be hyped up to be initially. But there were a lot of people today confused on how to watch it because it was on SNY, but it was also through a link that you could, if you don't have SNY on TV, you couldn't just watch it through streaming like how you would for any other MLB game. You had to go through the MLB app or online, and it was a free game that they would then allow you to watch. It was a little bit different than a normal covered game that you would get on SNY. But everybody, I do see a comment here. Euripa says, what do you think of this line? McNeil, Nimmo, Alonso, Lindor, Alvarez, Beatty, Marte, Bader, Vientos. I do not like Vientos in the bottom of the order whatsoever. I think that I want a guy that has speed and ability to get on base if you're in the 9-hole. I would prefer actually McNeil in the 9-hole versus Vientos, so that way McNeil can be another leadoff option, essentially. That is my personal preference. And Vientos, I would much rather have, in the 6-7 range than I would all the way at 9th. Because yes, even though that there's a lot of uncertainty with him, you want to see what you have in Vientos if he's going to be playing, especially starting at DH, and you don't want to limit his opportunities. So even if he does become, continue to be a ground ball machine at times, even if he's striking out, at a crazy rate, I still want to see him given a proper leash and being utilized in proper situations versus batting 9th and getting sporadic playing time on a day-by-day basis. So that's where I stand when it comes to that. But everybody, that is going to do it for the live show. Thank you all so much for chiming in. Greatly appreciate it. We will be back live in just mere hours from the time of recording this to break down the biggest takeaways from today's win or loss against the Nationals as Adrian Hauser is on the bump for the Amazons and their regularly scheduled game. Thank you all so much for watching. The Mets win by a final score of 4-2 in their prospect in their spring breakout prospect game. I'll talk to you guys again real soon. Let's go Mets, baby. Peace out.